Welcome to the Alchemists Inkwell.
This is the podcast that is the spiritual podcast for grounded people. Unless you're me today, in which case I'm not grounded at all.
I know, we just thought of a huge conversation about how Krista's feeling ungrounded, and then that comes out. I love it. I'm Emily.
And I'm KristaLyn. We are really excited today to be setting the tone for December using mostly like a lot of talk about astrology, because we do have another eclipse coming up on December 4th, which from the time that this episode is aired, which would be December 2nd. So it's only a couple days after you're listening to this. If you're listening to this the day it airs, if you're listening to it after it airs, don't worry. The effects of it are still happening around you. And in fact, this is an even more opportune time to be late if it happens that way, because eclipses are very collective. So there's really not much personal manifesting that's needed, but there is a lot of conscious awareness and observation that we are going to be talking about, along with all the details going along with this eclipse on a mundane, aka global and personal level.
Yeah. And that it's important to note that too, is like this eclipse is something that like we're going to feel the effects of very strongly, at least for the first couple of days following it. So if you are listening to this episode after the fact, or even years after the fact, who knows when you're listening to this, you're going to still, it'll still help you give you an understanding of like what is going on currently and what you will be, how you will benefit from that on an energetic level. Also, you guys are probably already feeling all of the crazy energy coming in too, because it's really intense right now. There's like, you're already talking about how we're feeling ungrounded. I was mentioning how I feel this crazy buildup of like excitement energy, and I have for days, but there's no place to put it. Like, I'm not excited for something in particular. Like there's no like, I'm not, it's just like, I'm so excited for stuff.
It's Christmas, right? It's the holiday season. Whatever you're excited for, the celebrations of I'm excited for the fact that the days are going to be at their shortest soon, because I am a sunshine person. I was born at night, but I really need the sun to thrive. So I'm looking forward to the days beginning to get longer again after that solstice coming up. That's going to be pretty great. And there is a lot of shifting, changing, culminating energy happening over the course of December. So if you, like Emily, like you're super in tune with the energies, ebbs and flows and peaks and what is it called, troughs, when it's low. Yeah.
Canyons, I guess.
Yeah.
But troughs also work.
Troughs. I'm going to go with troughs because it's fun to say. But so peaks and troughs, if you're like that and you pick up on those things, you've got a lot of peaks that you're probably feeling coming in this month. So there's a lot of peak energy, a lot of drastic energy, I want to say, because we do have some interactions with both Pluto and Uranus who like to take things to another level. And we'll get into that a little bit more throughout the podcast as well. So I'll be explaining the difference between Pluto's idea of extreme and Uranus's idea of extremes, because they are different.
Well, that's good to know. Yeah, I think that's definitely something coming in. I'm not even really in the Christmassy mood yet, and I don't know why that is. I was thinking about that this morning. I was inside Safeway getting Starbucks and everything. Like, there's Christmas music on,
and the Christmas cups.
I
love the Starbucks Christmas cups.
I was a little bit grumpy because I ordered something and she gave it to me iced, and I was like, "Does this not come hot?" She was like, "Not today," and just like hands for the cup, and I was like, "It's fine. I'll just take it iced." I went home and heated it up, but I didn't get a Christmas cup, which was unfortunate. But I'm like looking around, I'm like, don't feel it. Christmas isn't here yet for me at all.
Oh, see, we had at my husband's coffee shop over the weekend, which for anybody who doesn't know, my husband runs a dog-friendly coffee and bookshop in a renovated church in our little town. And our town had sort of on Small Business Saturday, they did our Home for the Holidays thing where we light up different monuments along our streets, and it all ends at BAMC with a brass band and all this really cool stuff. And they were dressed Victorian style, and it was adorable. And so us being there all day surrounded by different Christmassy events and holiday-y events going on, it really got us into the mood. And, you know, my whole family was there. So it was really neat to just sort of say, you know what, whether I feel it right now or not, I'm claiming that this is my holiday spirit moment.
Nice.
And I like said it out loud, like, this is when it begins. I've decided I'm going to start listening to the holiday music. I'm going to watch the baking shows. I've been watching Hallmark. I am that cheesy and I'm not ashamed.
That's awesome. I love, so for those of you who don't live in Christmastown, it's basically all entirely Victorian buildings. Like
Mm.
90% of the buildings feel like these old Victorian, like Edison's first factories there. Like we're talking old stuff. So it's super cool. And just to touch on the church, it's not just a church. It is this stone structure, like built from like river stone, massive,
Yeah.
beautiful, high vaulted ceilings experience. That is so,
Straight
just
out
to
of
give you a better
Scotland.
picture. It's
Yeah.
straight out of Scotland. It's really
Yeah.
cool. It's really, really cool. Um, yeah, we haven't really done anything Christmassy yet. The kids have a Christmas choir concert on Saturday. So I think that'll be my first, like, oh yeah. And then also I have my son's birthday was, when you listen to this, it was on Tuesday. And then my husband's birthday is today when this is coming out. Not when we're recording it, but when this is coming out. So
Yay.
once those move through too, then I think I might feel more Christmassy. But for some reason, like I always feel too, like, because I live in a snowy place, there's no snow yet. So I'm like, nah, no snow,
Mm.
no Christmas.
Yeah.
Just shutting that
We had,
down.
we had like 2 inches yesterday, and my husband and I had decorated on Thanksgiving on that day. So we put up all of our lights and got everything all set up, and it's just like, okay, there's snow outside. I'm lighting everything up. They're gonna look at it all day, and I'm just living in it. And it's been really nice to just, make it what I want it to be and make it when I want it to be, regardless of what else is going on around. Like I'm definitely in those final days that we are in right now. By the time this airs, Neptune will have stationed direct the day before. So Neptune stations direct after having been retrograde since May. It's finally going direct again on December 1st. And like I said, this is going to air on December 2nd. So you're probably already feeling that. But these last few days, I feel like it's really drowsy for me. It's really spacey. And we'll be moving forward with a little bit more clarity. But an active Neptune is going to be an interesting thing as well.
That'll be nice.
Yeah.
I agree. It's been very, again, really excited, nothing to do with it. So I guess I'll just sit with these kind of feelings of like dreamy, kind of tired, kind of spacey. I feel this energy coming in for this week as well, but a lot of energy of really active deity presences and ghosts and spirits and that kind of thing. Like that's been coming up quite a bit for me, just while out and about, being like, oh, there's someone over there, or like, I saw a video of this woman who took, this was really ironic because I was like lighting candles and thinking about like how fire energy affects and what deities can show up in the fire. And then I literally saw a TikTok video of like images of deities found in fire. And I was like, oh, okay, well, this is validating. Like different things like that are just really coming up really strongly. And lots of very intense dream cycles coming up. So if you're feeling those things, it's not just you, it's definitely a collective level of, it usually doesn't feel this strong except when there's thinning of the veils. But I think that's because of this really crazy intense eclipse that's coming in and the energy that we're going to be benefiting from that, not to mention it's leading up to the solstice, which things do get a little bit more open during the solstice and equinoxes. Equinoxi?
I don't know, but I prefer equinoxi.
I do too. Anyway, it's definitely coming up that way. So if you're starting to feel like things are trying to talk to you or your guides are getting a hold of you, seeing a lot more synchronicities, I just want to validate that even before it starts happening. Yes, you're not wrong. So that is coming up a lot.
Yeah. And the planets are affirming it, and the world is affirming it. You have that whole as above, so below. The planets are just sort of mirroring to us what's going on around us, which is great for taking a higher perspective. So do we want to dive into the eclipse a little bit and kind of give an overview of the stuff?
Let's do it. I'm going to let Krista talk quite a bit on this one because she has all of the astrological backing to it. I'll add little things about energy and ask questions when I have them, because I'm sure that I will. But I feel like it's really important and essential for all of you to understand a lot of the astrology that's going on, because it is really powerful and I want to make sure everyone's as empowered as possible. So just so you know, I'm just going to really follow your lead in a lot of ways.
Well, I appreciate it. And I love that you keep me on track, because I just love this. It's like my soul language, my heart language, my love language. So sometimes I forget to bring in the translation and the grounding and all those things. And this is the spiritual podcast for grounded people. So thank you for keeping me anchored.
Yes. We're presently ungrounded, grounded people.
Yes. So there are some parts of this eclipse that are really standing out in the chart. And so I'm going to list the different relationships between several planets that we're going to cover. And we'll just do a brief overview of the planets that we'll be mentioning. And then we'll go back and really revisit them in depth. Does that sound like a great idea?
100% love it. Real quick though, will you just talk briefly about the eclipse as a whole? When's it
Yes.
happening? Where is it happening? How long is it? Just so everyone
Yeah.
understands like that level.
Perfect idea, actually. So a couple weeks ago, we had the lunar eclipse. If you didn't listen to that episode, it's actually a really great idea to listen to that episode along with this one, because these two eclipses are kind of a pair, even though they are straddling the shift of the nodes, going from where this eclipse is taking place. The south node is in Sagittarius, the north node is in Gemini. They have been in these positions since May of 2020. And now they're getting ready to flip over and actually go into a north node in Taurus, south node in Scorpio dynamic, which they will be in for another 1.5 year cycle. So we're in this phase where the last eclipse, lunar, kind of spoke to all of us as a collective people, saying, hey, this is what's beginning. This is what's coming up. And you can kind of feel it in your soul as it emerges. This solar eclipse is saying, hey, we're going to bookend this cycle that's been happening over the last 1.5 years. This one is going to be about starting from the top. And just solar eclipses really affect the leadership structures and just the linchpins of certain things. So when we're talking about a lunar eclipse, the moon is about the people, the body, that kind of stuff. My mentor helps me stay on track with this kind of stuff. So shout out to Larry if she's listening. She's a rock star and I appreciate her so much. And then you have the solar eclipse, which really affects the king, so to speak. So thinking about the king in any sort of structure or establishment that you're working with, whether it's a business and it's a CEO, or a country and it's the leader of that country in whatever capacity, we're looking at that kind of stuff. And Emily and I were talking at the beginning of this episode how we're already beginning to see some headlines about that. And that's another thing about this. The headlines are really going to show, because like we mentioned at the beginning, this is a much more collective event than your usual full moon or new moon. And so this is a new moon because the sun and the moon are in the same position, but it's also an eclipse because they're also at the same declination. They're hanging out at the same level where they can actually block each other. The moon is in between the earth and the sun, so it's kind of overshadowing the sun, which is what creates a solar eclipse. This one, it's usually this big spectacle where the day turns to night and all of those cool things that happen. This one is unique in that it's a very short version. And it's really only visible in Antarctica. So if you are wondering, like, how early do I have to get up to see it? Don't bother. You can get up to feel or witness or just meditate and receive if that's something that you want to do. But don't worry about seeing it unless you happen to be listening from Antarctica, in which case, thanks for tuning in from Antarctica. That's pretty cool.
Email us, please.
Yeah, let us know, man. What did it look like? Send us pictures. But so if you want to observe the moment of this, and I emphasize observe because again, this is not really a time for practicing magic and things like that, or putting your will into something, because this is about, imagine that you manifest on a new moon and a full moon and you're directing your train. But you don't always know if you're on exactly the right track. Like it might get rickety out there. An eclipse comes around and actually makes sure that you are on the right track. We are not rickety anymore. The locomotive turns into a bullet train, so it's just saying, hey, everybody, we need to get on the same page. New starting point. Okay, go from here and we'll keep you on track and keep nudging you this way and that as the eclipses happen, which they do usually 4 so many times a year. So the time that you would be waking up, if you really wanted to observe this, is about 2:30 a.m. Eastern time. So if you happen to be awake at that time and you want to just meditate and ask what you need to know or what you can observe for yourself, that's awesome. If not, totally fine. I know I won't probably be awake.
What time zone is Antarctica?
Okay, so the chart, when I calculated it, it says BZT2. So it's +3, where Eastern time is +5 from the GMT or the global time. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But is it the whole continent that's that way? Because it's on the pole.
Okay. So here's a fun fact to go along with that as we're talking about the location of this. When you're doing a chart, again, my mentor taught me this and affirmed it for me, but when you're doing a chart for an eclipse, you want to do it for the location that the eclipse is visible. Antarctica doesn't have any points that I could say, hey, that's a city. because it's Antarctica. So I chose the southernmost city, which happens to be in Argentina. So that's where I'm basing this chart off of. It's still workable. It still makes total sense. So don't worry about that. But for that time zone, we are looking at the BZT2 time zone, which is an additional 3 hours from our global time.
Interesting.
Yeah, cool, right?
Time is fake. This is just
Yeah.
time is just fake.
It's
That's
an
the moral of the
arbitrary
story.
calculation and we made it up.
Mhm.
Yeah. But it's helpful for, getting things on the same page. I think I do wonder if that's going to evolve in times to come. But that's a topic for another podcast. I think it'd be really fun, another episode. So talking about the chart itself, there are some standout things going on in this chart, especially between Jupiter and Mars. We'll be talking about their relationship. We'll be talking about the new moon, which is the moon and the sun, because they'll be together. They are interacting with Mercury and also with Neptune. So we'll talk about that. And we're going to talk about Venus and Pluto, which is an interesting dynamic. Like you can just feel the energy of that as soon as you say it. And then I do want to also mention the applying aspect with Saturn and Uranus, which has been a major theme over 2021 and is coming to a culmination at right on Christmas Eve. We have some great transits some astrology good transits. That's another thing that some people like on Twitter and everything will use, where it may not be like the most beneficial thing, but it affirms astrology so well, they call it astrology good. So we have some really dynamic transits happening this month, right around Christmas. And I will be sharing those as they become more and more relevant. But because they are also present in this chart, we'll be covering them very lightly today too.
Yeah. And that's all just stuff happening essentially during the eclipse. Like all of those like 5 bullet points she listed with all of the different planets are basically all happening on the same day.
Yeah.
Which is important to note. And I just want to call that out. So like, not just because it's an eclipse energy do we recommend just resting and receiving, but also because all of this, it's a rest, receive, observe sort of time. And definitely an energy of like, take some time to just journal out all the things you're feeling kind of space, as opposed to trying to manifest or trying to, as Krista said, like, set the track yourself. Like it's perfect time to let the tracks get set for you, let them get checked in on that kind of energy, and just to relax and receive the amount of stuff that is coming our way. Also, just pay attention to the headlines on a genuine level. Like what she was talking about, like the king falling. One of the ones we saw quite literally this morning when we were starting to record this is how the Queen of England is no longer going to be the monarch or the head of state for Barbados. So we were just like, well, there we go. Like it's already starting. So like just keep those things kind of like in your mind as you go through this little bit of time. And also because it lasts a short amount of time, the effects of it are fairly like, you can explain this better than I can, but I guess, typically eclipses affect you for a couple months, etc. And this one doesn't. This is a shorter amount of time, right? Or we think.
One of a Renaissance astrologer, William Lilly, who contributed a lot to astrology, and I really do appreciate his work, mentions that you can consider lunar eclipses, the effects of them will unfold for a ratio of 1 month per hour that the eclipse lasts. So like the last lunar eclipse lasted 3 hours, and the moon goes around its cycle in a month. So it rules a month. And that's why you would say, okay, well, it lasted 3 hours. The moon rules a month. So we'll look for the events to unfold of this over the next 3 months. And that's cool, right? Because it's starting a new cycle. It's almost pertinent to this that it is so short because it is finishing a cycle. So it's almost like it's saying, hey, I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to let you talk, to the nodes moving into Taurus and Scorpio. This eclipse only lasts 2 minutes. So again, when I was talking to other astrologers about this, it's like, that's not an hour. I'm not great at math, but that's not an hour. So it was funny. I was really fussing over this in my head because I like to give as much detail as I can think of. So last night I was thinking, what am I missing for my notes for tomorrow? What am I not sharing with people that I could? What more can I give? And I was just thinking, how do I break this down? So what I can presume, if a sun, which cycles around for a year, right? The sun governs the year for us. So for every hour, you would mark 1 year. It's a 1 year to 1 hour ratio for the duration of the eclipse, except this one is 2 minutes. So when I tried to do the scale, and again, forgive my math, I was an English major and now I love astrology. So you can imagine that math, though I've done this multiple times and I've had people check my math, I am not entirely the most confident when I come up with numbers. But it does seem like this is going to be effects rolling out in under a year, simply because it is that less than the hour scale. And if I did my math right, don't quote me on this or write it down in any doctrine like a William Lilly style, but I would scale, if you go 365 days equal to 60 minutes, it looks like this comes out to about 11 days. So again, I hesitate to mark that as an end all be all final word, but it seems like this is one of the notes I have for when we talk later on the actual aspects happening within this eclipse is because it's so short and because of some of the tension between Jupiter and Mars, which I'll cover, it feels less like the expansive, fiery explosion of Sagittarius ruled by Jupiter, because Jupiter is expansive. It rules Sagittarius. Sagittarius loves to expand things as well. It feels less like an explosion, more like a firecracker. Yeah.
Makes sense. Energetically, when I look at the energy of it, I think your calculations are fairly accurate. Like this all feels like it leads up to basically the big bulk of it from the eclipse for like the next 11, 12 days. And then it kind of tapers off gradually going into the solstice. Like that's the way that the energy looks to me. So it definitely feels like the first half of the month is on fire, for lack of a better term, because that's what it feels like. Is that like everything's just lit up and just like going. So
yeah.
From as what I can validate, which as not being an astrologer who did not do the math, I think that that's right.
Yeah, I would say it's a safe bet to presume that this stuff is going to unfold in less than a year, and perhaps 11 days. But that's something I will be eagerly observing myself, just to test that, because it is an experiment to look at that for me. So I'm looking at that, and I'm kind of excited to see if my theory plays out well on that one.
So talk about the first aspect. I believe that was the Jupiter situation happening. Okay, lay it on.
So this eclipse is happening. Again, the eclipse is a conjunction between the sun and the moon. A conjunction simply means they're in the same spot. So on the chart, if you look at it and you mark them as you would minutes on a clock or degrees on a circle, they are at 12 degrees and 22 minutes in Sagittarius. We are in Sagittarius season, which means the sun is in Sagittarius. The new moon would, of course, be the sun and the moon coming together. And if the sun's in Sagittarius, then so is the moon. And that's kind of how you can think about a new moon and like where it'll end up. So what we're looking at there is, okay, so this is where it's taking place. What planet rules Sagittarius? Because that's going to give us some context of just more layers, more sentences to add to the story, so to speak, of the story that this eclipse is telling. And Jupiter is the ruler of Sagittarius. So that's why I'm bringing Jupiter into it more prominently. And at this time, Jupiter is interacting with Mars. And what that is doing is taking two very fiery planets. You know, many people know Mars as the archetype of fiery, ambitious, hot-headed, you know, those kinds of, god of war kind of things, not always waging war. Sometimes he's the avenger, right? So you can think of someone who is willing to fight for the purpose. And then you have Jupiter, who is this generally a benevolent, I always picture Jupiter as the ghost of Christmas present, if you want to like an archetype to fit with him. But also in Greek lore, he's Zeus. So you can look at things like that. And so you have this expansive father of the zodiac kind of thing coming up with Mars, and they create a square with each other. And a square literally is just a 90-degree angle. So they're not seeing eye to eye. In fact, they might be conflicting with each other. So whereas Jupiter would be more of an explosion of heat or fire, Mars is the one that's saying, yeah, but let's make it fast. And so they're coming to grips, headbutting a little bit, and it becomes that firecracker rather than the explosion kind of energy. And again, this is happening in a remote location, and it's only for a few minutes. So that really emphasizes what's going on with that. And Mars is at a position now where it's in his domicile. Mars actually rules Scorpio traditionally, as well as Aries. So Mars is currently in Scorpio. And that kind of gives him a little bit of a boost. He's at home. He's feeling comfortable. He's feeling good about himself. And so he's kind of got the extra power boost. If you think about a video game, he got the power up, right? And Jupiter is squaring him from Aquarius. He's close to a place, Jupiter, where he's comfortable, but not quite there. So he's a little bit exhausted from this journey he's been through Capricorn and Aquarius, and he's about to go back home into Pisces. But right now, he's just not there yet. So this dynamic between the two of them is a lot of fire, but more of a poof happening, because they kind of are not canceling each other out, but, you know, detracting from each other's abilities.
So that all makes perfect sense. And I understand that for sure. But how would that like show up in someone's personal life, or show up in like what people can see in the world around them, like that specific part of this event?
Yeah. So at the end of this, I am going to culminate everything, because we really want to look at the chart holistically. But for this aspect, to have a really good understanding of it, which thank you so much for asking, it's a great point. You really want to think about how this might create a situation where you want to count to 10 before you react to something, because you're either going to take things out of context and blow them out of proportion. Again, the expansive explosion, fiery kind of thing. And again, that fieriness of Mars is saying, hey, this is something that is a bigger picture that I'm irritated about. And at the same time, let's ease this into what else Mars is doing, because this is going to add some context here as well. Mars is in this square with Jupiter, but Mars is also about to form a sextile with Pluto. Pluto is the other ruler of Scorpio. So it's currently in Capricorn, doing some things we'll talk about later as well. So we have this opportunity, if you take it, to make some very transformative, and with this eclipse being a solar eclipse, there may be some transformative new beginnings that really broaden your horizon. Jupiter loves to travel. Jupiter is, Sagittarius rules foreign travel, rules deeper education, rules philosophy, religion, politics, those worldview level things, you know, the broad horizons. And Mars is like, yeah, but I don't want to have to take a long time to do it. Mars is saying, I want to do the Cliff Notes version and say that I've learned it, which is kind of how I got through college, so I can relate. But at this point, we're seeing this like shift happening, and it's going to be broadening your horizons, but doing it very quickly. And so you might feel resistant to that, because it's a lot of change all at once, and it's big change all at once, adding in that intensity of the solar eclipse. But if you turn it on the flip side and you consciously, I like to say, for a lunar eclipse, you go with the flow. For a solar eclipse, you flow with the go. And so you flow with where things are going, and just see it and like catch that train, run along with it and jump on, and then just see what happens next. That's a very Jupiterian thing to do as well. So if you're flowing with the go on this,
I feel like that needs to be a freaking t-shirt. Just flow with the go. Like
flow with
go with the flow. Totally get it. But flow with the go has a whole other power and energy behind it. I love that.
Yeah. So, you know, tying that first bit together, I would say that flow with the go really does encapsulate how people can associate this, because Jupiter is saying, hey, big energy. Mars is saying, hey, but right now. The solar eclipse is saying, yep, we're doing something on a collective level. This is a top tier thing. Just watch us go. The eclipse is the go, and then you are flowing with it. So just jumping on and saying, I see it moving. I'm going to just go with it and see where it takes me. And it reminds me of like going like a river rapid kind of thing. What do you call that?
Whitewater rafting?
Thank you. Whitewater rafting. That's what this feels like, where you're seeing what's ahead of you and you're adapting to it, but you are not telling the raft where it's going. The river is telling the raft where it's going, and you are navigating that. So that's a really great way to view this energy, especially for this part of it.
Have a paddle, but you want to wear a helmet. I love it.
You might fall into the water and get back up, and it's okay. It's going to be something that is seat of your pants kind of feeling, but it's exciting, right? You know, Pluto gets a reputation for being, you know, in again with the Greek archetypes, Hades. And that is the god of the underworld. Yes, but everything has to begin or end in that space of the underworld space. It's the before creation just as much as it is after creation.
It's important to note, and I love that you just made that distinction, because he's the god of the underworld, not the god of death.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the change. A lot of people are like, and I've even heard Pluto talked about this in this kind of way with like pop astrology and stuff. It's like, oh, well, you know, it's the god of death. It's they break stuff down, all this stuff. And it's like, kind of, but god of the underworld. It's a revolution. It's change. It's literally like essentially like being the god of a changed state of being. It's like the core of it.
And sometimes death can be the expression of that transformation, right? But I agree with you. It's not the archetype itself. So that is a really important and really valuable distinction to keep in mind, because I'll tell you guys, everybody has Pluto in their chart. Everybody has an 8th house in their chart. Everybody has, traditionally, you would look at Saturn, perhaps the 4th house. There are signifiers associated with things such as death in everybody's chart. But not every day is going to be a death door. So you have to, and not even every aspect that could potentially be an indicator of an opportunity for transformation, such as death, is going to be one. You can't live every day saying, oh no, I myself am going through a natal transit right now, which would technically be an indicator of possible transitional opportunities, if we want to put it that way. And I have no intention of going anywhere in that respect. I have every intention of transforming myself and taking it to the next level and being conscious of how I'm honoring my existence.
Right.
That is one way that you can utilize the energy and again, flow with the go.
Yeah. Yep. I love that. I love that. Okay. Awesome. So bring us to our next place that we're in, because that's just one of the things happening with this eclipse.
Yeah. So we've now, just to wrap it around a little bit, we've talked about Jupiter, because Jupiter is the ruler of Sagittarius, which is where this new moon is happening, and the interactions that Jupiter is having with Mars, as well as the little interactions that are going on from Mars to Pluto. Now we want to move on to the actual place of the new moon and what the sun and moon, being the new moon, being the eclipse in and of themselves, are doing in their positions as well. So the sun and the moon are conjunct. That is the nature of a new moon, and that is the nature of a solar eclipse. And they are also quite close to Mercury. Mercury actually just conjoined with the sun over the last weekend from the time that this aired. I think it was on Saturday or Sunday before the airing of this. So that would have been the 28th or the 27th of November. So Mercury hasn't gotten entirely far away yet. And when a planet is close to the sun, especially within 8 degrees or so, it's still considered very much a blend of that sun's energy. It's called combust. And so the moon and Mercury on either side of the sun are within that range. The moon is right on top of the sun, also known as Cazimi. And Mercury is from the 12 degrees and 22 minutes that the sun is currently at. Mercury is at 15 degrees and 13 minutes. So it's just about 3 degrees away, which is well within that 8-degree range. So we really want to blend that Mercury idea in. At the same time, Neptune is pretty close to sextile. Let me just confirm that it is the sextile here. I think it actually might be a square. Yep, it's a square. There we go. So it is forming a square to these. Neptune is at 20 degrees. So if you, for a conjunction and for the sun and moon, since they do a lot of motion, I like to give them a wider berth for where they're going to be making an effect between another planet and themselves. And Mercury is within 5 degrees. So I would put that in, especially for an eclipse, just saying that the culminating energy that's in this chart is probably something that we're going to be seeing at least a trickle of in the results from this. So other astrologers may have different perspectives on that, but this is where I'm coming from today, where I'm going to take into account, for the purposes of looking at this chart as a big picture, the fact that the sun, the moon, and Mercury are interacting in a square with Neptune. Mercury is about communication. Mercury in Greek mythology is Hermes. So the messenger, right? And so we have Mercury saying, I got the message from this eclipse and I'm ready to deliver it. But Neptune's like, you got what message again? And it's like Neptune comes in and confuses Mercury. Neptune is very anomalous. It's the part of, it's the deepest parts of the ocean. It rules dreams. It rules the unconscious. And those things you can't put in a box, right? So it's this thing that's saying, hey, what were you thinking again? Were you sure about that? So it's asking Mercury, like, as you understand this message, how are you going to tell people? What are you going to tell people? Do you have the right words? And so when we look at the way that this might show up, is the message may be there and it may be very, like, again, like a firecracker. However, our perception of it may be one of, what just happened? Am I sure that that's what I saw? Or, is this exactly what it appears to be? Or is there something layered beneath?
I would also just be really conscious if you already get triggered into places of too good to be true. If good things stuff happens to you,
Mm-hmm.
be really conscious of not just going into that zone, because this is already asking you to question it, but question it from a place of like honest integrity. Muscle testing will be really beneficial if you know how to do that. I have videos
Mm-hmm.
about that on my TikTok. I don't know if you do or not. I think you probably do
I think I
too.
do.
So if you guys need help on that, that'll be really helpful. But like if something amazing happens with this eclipse, which it feels like a lot of that energy, a lot of peaks, as we
Mm-hmm.
said before, that I think would be something to pay a lot of attention to energetically is, oh, if you are having those thoughts come up, it's on purpose. And like,
Yeah.
let's look to our higher self to answer those questions.
And that's another excellent point, because again, you may be receiving information and it may be a little bit, as I think you said, triggering to the point where it makes you want to react in a way that is bigger than maybe necessary at the
Yeah.
moment. Again, this is a collective experience. So it's not something that you need to worry about individually. It may not even be something that is within your realm of influence. Likely it is not going to be within your realm of direct influence. So on one hand, that means that you're off the hook. There's nothing you need to do but watch and observe and then align yourself with that. And then look around yourself and see what is within your realm of influence that this brings up. And again, flow with that, go. Let this eclipse say, hey, here's a thing that you can do that is near you, that is changeable and within your sphere of influence. Go to that and then see what comes up for you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I think that's a great way of putting it, for sure. It's interesting just to hear, and I know we still have like a couple more aspects to go through, but just to hear already how the energy is stacking on top of each other, like it does benefit one another and like communicate with one another, of course, because it's divinely supported. But just like feeling that out, like it's gonna be a day, guys.
Yeah. And the one way that I love looking at the chart is it is a story. If you look at the chart,
Mhm.
it is a circle. And so everything's going around in these cycles. And if I had to kind of pinpoint a certain plot point in your typical hero's journey to this moment,
Yeah.
knowing that I'm gonna put the climactic moment in late February, not only because the United States has its Pluto return at that time, but also because of other things that are effective at that time too. With we'll talk about it as it comes up, but we're going to be looking at more things with more of a resolution climax moment with Pluto, with Mars, with Venus, all of those things. They're going to be doing a dance in late February. And so I'm going to view that as sort of a climactic moment to this story we've been telling since about January last year or December of 2020. This would be the third plot point, where it's this shift in perspective. Didn't realize that was what was going on. Now I realize it. I'm going to take a minute. I'm going to regroup and I'm going to keep moving forward. So that's very much an energy going on with this. But again, realizing that this isn't your life that is being attacked. It isn't your life that is crumbling. So it's not something to be afraid of at all. It's stuff that's happening on a scale where it's going to be rebuilding or reforming our structures and really setting us up for success in a new way of doing things. One of the things I'll be talking about in just a moment is building new traditions, which I think is going to be a major theme around the holiday this year. Around the solstice, around Christmas Day, around Yule is the same day as Christmas, right? Or do we celebrate that on the solstice? I'm not as educated there as I'd like to be.
It I personally celebrate I celebrate the ancient Greek form of a holiday on the solstice. And I know relatively close to that is Yule as well. I
Mm-hmm.
believe it's right on the solstice, if not right next to it. I usually When I say like when I don't know what someone celebrates, especially being part of the spiritual community, I call it Chrismica Yule, which is like just
There's
a
Saturnalia.
combination
I
of
was
all
wondering.
of the yeah. So
Yeah.
Saturnalia is like the Roman celebration.
Mhm.
Um, and so it combines like kind of all of those things because they all happen so close together.
Yeah. Well, and they all seem to be anchored on that whole shortest night of the year, or sorry, shortest day of the year, the sun really starting to emerge again from that slumber, Saturn ruling Capricorn and darkness and winter, Saturnalia, which I think is awesome. I just, my astrologer heart loves that. But yeah, so
It was
that's
like
that's
10
a big
days
thing.
straight of drinking, like nonstop, without break, like to the point where it was like governed, you had to drink a certain
Yep.
amount levels of like you're getting hammered right now.
Yeah. So darkness equals blackout.
Uh-huh. But they're also fairly close to the equator, so keep that in
Yeah.
mind too. So it's not
Mhm.
as short.
Yeah, very true.
Short.
Great point. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was warm, not as short, and people just went out in the streets naked, very, very, very naked. Flowers were a big deal. And got really hammered.
Mm-hmm.
There was other things too, but those are the big ones.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, with how cold and dark it gets, sometimes I'm tempted. I'm more of the person that wouldn't go to the extremes of drinking and nakedness. It's just not my style. More power to anybody whose style it is. That's fascinating and wonderful for them. I just want to like I want to turn time ahead. I just want the sun to come up. I'm at this point in the year, I'm just like, how can I skip even sleeping and just get to the next day where I can do something? Because I feel so almost functionless personally when the sun goes down. I'm like Wally when his power goes down. I'm just like, oh, okay. But that's a great time for video games, which I also love. So
I wake up at night.
oh, that's so cool.
Is it?
I
I don't
respect that
know if it
about you
is.
and I admire that about you because I'm with the sun, and when the sun goes away, I'm just boom.
Yeah, no, if I like I'll wake up in the morning and be exhausted all day long and the sun goes down, I'll be like, the day has begun. Which is not helpful.
Oh, I love that though. I love that there's all types in the world. It's so
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. So
Next
where
aspect,
were
lay it
we?
on
Yeah.
us.
All right. So the next one I want to talk about is Venus. And Venus is interacting in the chart of the eclipse because she is coming very close in conjunction now with Pluto. And this is going to happen several times because Venus in this chart is at 22 degrees, Pluto's at 25. So they're only 3 degrees apart from each other. And this is important because when Venus finally reaches 26 degrees, she will have on what day did I say? I think it's on December 12th or December 11th exactly. She will conjoin Pluto to the minute. And so that is kind of already building up in this chart. And we were talking about archetypes again, where Venus is Aphrodite, Pluto is Hades. But when I view them conjoined like this, I like to think of Persephone, especially being the time of year that it is. So if you think about that kind of that mythos to go along with it, that's kind of the energy that we're coming into. It's a mix of the beauty of darkness, the beauty of transformation, that comfort in the shadow, which I think is a really unique thing. Yes, again, you have transformation, right? And Pluto can also be an indicator of crisis in relationships, which Venus rules. There are multiple ways that can play out. So again, I strongly encourage everybody, don't panic. Don't freak out. Don't think that you're like doomed to divorce, because chances are, if you've been together for a while, you may have already experienced the retrograde of Venus, which she is about to enter. So on the 19th, she will turn retrograde and go backwards, which means she's going to meet up with Pluto again. Then she'll stop at 11 of Capricorn. So she goes back for quite a while into January, and then she moves forward again as she would do. But in that process, she will meet up with Pluto one more time by the end of February. So we're building up to that first interaction between them in this chart. And so themes around that are especially with that influence of Mars that we talked about before, we're driven towards transformation in our relationships. We are driven towards the beauty of allowing things to fall away. Think about, it reminds me of a flower in the snow. So it's this dynamic, this juxtaposition of that winter feeling and that spring feeling of one thing giving way into another and allowing something to rest in order for it to come forth again. So it is that underworld kind of theme that we're going into. And it reminds me very much of an Egyptian concept where when the sun sets at the end of every day, one of the notions was that it goes through the underworld before it rises again and has new birth. And that's very much a situation that we're experiencing now as well, where it's the beauty of decay, the beauty of shadow, kind of the velvety darkness. If you want to think about it that way, that was one of the things that I really felt when I leaned into the energy. So the way that might show up is you might feel like allowing the deconstruction of your relationship structures. Again, this is happening in Capricorn. So it's important to remember that's a foundational, a very earthy rooted energy. So it's the structures and the foundations of relationships, also the limitations that had been put on relationships, the conditions that have accidentally snuck into our relationships and made our love with friends, ourselves, valuables that we have, different things that we've put rules on that don't need rules anymore. You'll find that those rules go away. And as those rules go away, the relationship might change. And one of the things I've been talking about lately is some friends of mine have been talking about tethers and cutting tethers. And I know you work a lot with this too, Emily. And they were saying how don't cut them entirely, just diminish them because you want to salvage your relationship if it's salvageable. And I came in with my hang on a second, because my methodology is allow that tether, which is a condition. It's an I love you because, or I love you if, allow that to fall away. Let the person off the hook and see if they stay anyway. It is that whole, if you love them, let them go. And if it's meant to be, they'll come back. That is so true. And I know this from experience in life. I'm sure you've had experiences like that as well. Sometimes they go and they stay away and everybody grows apart. But sometimes you allow that person to be themselves and you see this more fulfilling expression of a relationship come true. I've had this over the years with my family. My mom and I, when we, you finally come to see the person as the person, not as the projection you have of that person or the expectations you have of that person. And it works both ways in a relationship. If you put rules on someone of how they have to be in order for you to be happy, you're creating conditions. And in this energy, those conditions have the opportunity to just go away. And then you can see how easy it can be to have a relationship, how flowing it can be, how natural it can be. And it really should be. So one of that in a personal level, that's some things I would hope to see for people. And again, some relationships may fall away in that process, but it's always going to be for the highest best that you can have. I'm going to say highest best, even though it feels like it's not good grammar. Don't care. It feels right to say in this situation. Another thing to keep an eye out for during this process of Venus retrograde, since this is marking the beginning of it, and really just putting that pin in the whole cycle of it, is we may see, and I saw things about this in the headlines today already, where certain topics of abuse of certain powers and authorities may come into play. And just it's an ending or a rebirth. You get either one, and sometimes one leads to another of relationships. And that can be with, again, yourself. I actually had someone comment on one of my TikToks explaining the Venus retrograde, saying, I don't have any relationships. And to someone who feels that way, think about your friends, think about people that you spend a lot of time with, think about your relationship to yourself, because my biggest thing, which we'll talk about later when we cover Venus retrograde more in its entirety, is show up as yourself to the relationship and see what happens. That's where you're really going to see you standing in your power the most. Another thing to be aware of that may play into this eclipse is being aware of excess, being aware of suspicion. And some people have mentioned jealousy in relationships, that whole, like, I'm not sure what's going on and I need to really dig down into this. Pluto unearths things just as much as it buries them. So that which is buried may come to light, and that which is getting a little bit too much attention may be laid to rest.
I would also say that shows up energetically when I was looking at it as you were talking, with things that might have happened in past relationships that are still affecting your current one.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. So unearthing all of those things that you probably haven't looked at in a long time. You thought you moved on past them and it's just this relationship affecting this particular thing, or you thought you healed from that or whatever. So if there is a resurgence of those kind of things, excuse me, which I've already noticed has been coming up for people quite a bit, That's why.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so those are things to honor because that's things to help you grow stronger. It's not to your detriment.
Yeah. Yeah. So those are things to keep in mind of major dates in the actual cycle between Venus and Pluto, which we will talk about again as they become more relevant. That will be December 11th, and Christmas Day will be feeling effects of that as well. But remember, we're going to feel it for the first time on December 11th. So it's going to be a continuation of that cycle. So it's a story. It's unfolding. It's not something that's coming out of nowhere and slapping you upside the face with it. It's giving you this beginning, middle, and closure kind of thing that's going on. So witnessing, again, is always important. And under the effects of this eclipse, learning to witness, learning to move along with the energy, and to be able to be that kind of person that can see what's happening and move with it. That's going to be a huge lesson to take away from what this energy is going to feel like. This is a great opportunity to download the belief of witnessing your feelings, of witnessing rather than reacting and rather than controlling. And another way to view that is of allowing, learning how to allow, which is a powerful tool in manifesting. So you can actually learn what allowing feels like using this eclipse as an example, and then remember that when you get to that point when you are more actively manifesting with later lunations, full moons, and new moons.
Yeah. So let's tie this up a little bit.
Yeah.
With all of this energy, what are you recommending? What are some of your thoughts as far as like what we should be doing? And I mean, I know we've already said allow, receive, and I'm fully on board with that too. Yeah, absolutely. Also, like, as I mentioned, like journal down what you're feeling on the day, or maybe a couple days afterwards, right? What it was like, so that you have some retrospective time.
That's almost exactly one of the things I was going to recommend. On a mundane level, like on a global level, in the headlines, you can be prepared to not be surprised when you see things going on with leadership. We've already talked about some examples that are already coming up. Leadership necessarily just being the spotlight is on the people who run this stuff. So whoever's in charge is going to be held accountable of whatever is going on. So it really is that return on investment, whether that investment was well done and well invested, or maybe the decisions were not as well supported or supportive. So you may see things like that. Definitely worth keeping in mind. And we are going to be seeing those in areas around where this Saturn-Uranus square that I mentioned briefly before is coming up. That's really changing our structures. We saw this again, it is a cycle, and I'll talk even more about it as it comes up, which will be around Christmas Eve, actually. But in areas that Sagittarius rules, and foundationally with the structures between Saturn and Uranus right now, you're seeing things under religion, politics, that worldview stuff is where we're going to be coming from in this perspective. So people are going to be saying, hey, I see this policy, or I see this theory, and maybe the theory isn't coming into practice as well as it could. Maybe the actual results of the experiment aren't really showing success. It might be time to try a new hypothesis or try a new way of things. That's where that whole new traditions is coming up. And especially this time of year, we are all doing new traditions. Nothing's the same. So really, leaning into allowing things to change is huge, but I really, really recommend as a part of just honoring what happens with eclipses, writing down things that are happening in your life, writing down things that are happening in the headlines that stand out to you, so that as this unfolds, you can go back and review. One of the best things about a journal is you can actually compare it to either your personal astrology, to major transits in mundane astrology, or just to anything that's going on. You can track your own little hero's journey through that. This is going to be a nice plot point in a journey for you and for the world, and you're living it. So it's really exciting and kind of an honor to be able to be present with this moment, because it is something you'll probably be telling stories about 10 years from now, saying, I was there. So write it down. Make sure you remember what you want to tell later on. It's very important. An affirmation, because of how much relationship stuff is coming into this, and how much things that are going to feel out of your control are happening. The affirmation I would recommend for people is, I renew my vows to myself. That's really all that's in your control, right? So focus on what you want for yourself, where you stand, the power, the platform that you want to be on. And again, if you want more personalized affirmations on how this eclipse may be affecting your actual personal chart, I will be posting videos on my TikTok for every rising sign, affirmations that will help them flow with the go, if we're going to use that as a theme for this. And just remembering that it's finishing a cycle to make space for a new cycle. That's what we're doing right now. And it's a beautiful thing. Change can be beautiful, and it doesn't have to be something that causes resistance.
Yeah. The other thing I just want to reiterate again too is just pay attention if anything's trying to get your attention, if it's your guides or deities or whatever that is, like take space for that as well. See how that comes up. Card pulls are really good, not necessarily on the eclipse or for the eclipse, but just if someone's trying to get a hold of you and you're feeling drawn to want to reach out or connect with a deity, anything like that, this is a really good time to do it. Energy is really powerful and potent in that space.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't be charging any crystals or working with moon water or anything like that, but doing a pull and saying, what do I need to know? That's receiving. And I think that that's a great idea. If you're looking for some way to really just align with this energy and market, I think that that's a beautiful thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning into this. We're really excited to come back next week and talk about how it went.
Yeah. So keeping in mind some of the aspects we talked about, that Mars sextile Pluto, it's applying during the eclipse. It will be exact on the 6th. So you may notice the culmination of those events happening that day. On the 8th will be the exact of that Mars squaring Jupiter that we talked about. So you'll be noticing again that cinch point, linchpin, I don't know, however you want to talk about it, the culminating effects of that happening around the 8th. So again, the next week is going to be pretty dynamic. It's going to be exciting. You'll probably end up seeing a lot of things around travel, higher education, religion, politics, major theories and worldviews. Keep an eye out for it, observe it, be fascinated. Another Sagittarian thing is fascination. Allow yourself to be fascinated. And maybe that's another great affirmation is I am fascinated by the world around me. I think that feels really good.
That does. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you would like to watch us do this episode or any of our episodes, you can actually look at our YouTube under the Alchemist Inkwell. And we really appreciate your guys' support on whatever platform you're listening to this on. We really value you. Of course, if you want to check out any of our further information, we both post a lot of it to our TikToks. So Krista's is at The Real KristaLyn and mine is at Liker of Words. Just a quick little note, because I have 1,000 impersonators coming back in. That is my only handle on anything. We're talking Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok. That's it. I don't have another one. I will not reach out to you in your DMs. Sorry for that little inclusion, but it's been prolific the last couple days. I mean, and Instagram and TikTok won't remove them. So here we are.
It's a great thing to bring up as we're looking into relationships that we can trust. So it's very pertinent to be able to talk about that.
Tell your friends. No one gets scammed.
Yeah. And another thing that I would like to invite any listeners out there to do is if there is something that you want us to do more on, like if you want me to do videos that dive deeper into astrology in a way that is more like the actual astrology science, let us know. Comment on YouTube, send us an email, forgottenstorytellers@gmail.com. However you want to contact us, comment or DMs on Instagram and stuff like that, whatever you want to do, however you want to reach us, let us know, because we are open to doing individual videos on our YouTube as well, where I will dive more into astrology, affirmations, things that are in my wheelhouse and of my passions, and Emily will do likewise. So let us know what you want to see. Ask us questions. We'll be able to incorporate them as much as possible into this podcast, which has been such a great time already. You guys have been so supportive. We adore you. We love that you're sharing it with your friends, and we appreciate you so much.
Yeah, we really, really do. And I hope you guys have an amazing eclipse. Yeah. All of you alchemists out there, remember, you're divinely supported, and
go make some magic. We're going to have to just record that separately when we get it right, and then just tag it on the end. And then people who watch this video can watch us muddle it up every time and laugh with us.
I like it. It makes me happy.
Do we want to do it 3, 2, 1, go right now, just for fun, so that we can edit it into the podcast recording?
We'll see if it works. Here we
All right,
go.
ready?
You want to do the 3? Okay.
Yeah. 3, 2, 1, go
Go
make
make some magic. It worked so well, everybody. It worked so well.
Yeah, we'll
Oh
try
my
again
God.
next time. Tune in next week to see if we get it.
Bye.
Bye.